This is a story of Leo Schofield and his young wife, Michelle. They were married in 1986. You can see them here at their wedding. Leo is a transplant from like outside of Boston. He kind of stands out like a sore thumb. He's got that thick New England accent. And Michelle is this local girl. She's 17 in this picture. He's 20. They're going to start their lives together. So in the summer of 1986, they're married at the local church. And then one day in 1987, they've been married about 6 months now. Michelle gets off her shift at Tom's restaurant, and she walks across the street. And later on, she makes a phone call from that particular gas station across the street, and she calls Leo at 9:45 in the evening. And he's already worried. He thought she'd be there sooner. He's a heavy metal guitarist. He's at practice with his band. He's expecting Michelle. She finally calls at 9:45 and says, "I'll be right over." And they say, "I love you," and she leaves. And hours go by. Michelle never shows up. Leo, his friends, the family are getting a little bit frantic as the hours pass. They put up this missing persons flyer. They're driving around searching, trying to retrace the route that she would have taken, all the possible routes. Friends and family are extremely worried. The next day rolls around, still no sign of Michelle. None of her friends have seen her. She just completely disappeared. We get to the second day, the night, and there's a break in the case. They find Michelle's Mazda alongside I-4, not too far from where we are right now, just parked on the side of the road about 7 miles away from her restaurant in Lakeland. You can see Leo in the blue shirt. He arrives at the scene. Basically, they want to start searching immediately from this place and start tracing it backwards I-4 back to that Tom's restaurant. But police say, hold off until the morning. Don't disturb anything. We're going to get a helicopter to fly over, and once you start in the morning, you can start searching. So that's what they do. They start searching in the morning. Miles of I-4 is covered back. They start going back to the place where Tom's restaurant is, hoping that they find something. They're looking in ditches, just no luck. And then finally, Michelle's body is discovered along State Road 33 on the way back to that Tom's restaurant. She was stabbed 26 times and discovered in this particular spot, which this spot becomes a really big part of the case. If you listen to the podcast, you'll see this spot becomes very significant in the story, and I'll come back to that a little bit later. Michelle Schofield only married to Leo for 6 months. Leo was helping with the search. He's with his bandmates. He's with his friends, his family, Michelle's family. They're searching all this. And once they find the body, then they start to do a real investigation. It's no longer a missing persons case. They start canvassing the trailer park where Leo and Michelle lived together. They're talking to neighbors. They start finding out that Michelle and Leo had a very volatile relationship. Some of the neighbors say they saw Leo grab Michelle by the hair and drag her into the trailer. Other friends are saying things like Leo has hit Michelle, and that sort of guides the investigation. But they don't really have any evidence connecting Leo Schofield to this crime until they talk to a neighbor across the street from Leo's trailer, and that neighbor is Alice Scott. Alice Scott tells police that she saw Leo, on the night Michelle disappeared, walk out of the trailer after a fight, a very loud fight, carrying something heavy, insinuating that it's a body, and that he put it in the back of the Mazda and drove off. So this is the evidence that points to Leo. They finally have an eyewitness account of something, and this puts the murder scene in the trailer because of the witness, Alice Scott, and what she's observed. Takes about 16 months before Leo is indicted. The police don't really have any evidence, but ultimately he is indicted. He's the husband, and they bring him to trial. You can see him here with his defense attorney, Jack Edmond, who, a lot of the people we talked to said he looked exactly like Colonel Sanders. He wore these old Western suits. Jack's style was what they call trial by ambush. He does no preparation. He basically met Leo the night of a capital case, the night of the trial. And he goes in with an empty pad and doesn't know the state's evidence, not familiar with the case, and that becomes very apparent when you start reading the transcript. He just doesn't have command of the facts, and he's up against a very aggressive, very intelligent prosecutor by the name of John Aguero. And you can see Leo in this, the heavy metal rock and roller. Now he's got a jailhouse haircut. He's got this mismatched suit that he's switching out the jackets, and he just felt like he looked like a clown throughout the trial. One of the things that became a really big part of this case was that in the search, after the car was found, they split up, family members, friends, and they're all searching in ditches and everywhere, and it's Leo's father who finds the body. And after he finds the body, he tells police that God's voice had led him to the body. And this becomes a really big part of the trial. It's constantly talked about in the closing argument. Leo's father ends up testifying and really makes a mess of things with this vision. He tries to walk it back, but it just comes across as why you really had a vision from God. You knew where the body was. And that was the state's contention, that he knew where the body was. In fact, the prosecutor at one point approaches Leo, takes Leo into a room and says, I know you didn't do it. I know your father did it. I'll give you immunity to testify against your father. And Leo's like, I was with my father. He didn't do it. I can't testify to something that's not true. And what if you find the murder later on and I've said, my father did it? I'm not doing that. And so that deal goes away. I want to get a little bit into the weeds, into a part of the case that we didn't really focus much on in the podcast. We just did a little bit of it. But the carpet cleaner comes up. And one of the reasons the carpet cleaner comes up is that when police go into that trailer, the place where Michelle was, allegedly stabbed 26 times, there's not one speck of blood in that trailer. And so John Aguero, the prosecutor, knows that because of Alice Scott's testimony about what she saw, Leo carrying something out heavy, it had to be in that trailer, but there's no blood there. So what's interesting is the carpet cleaner comes up. And if you look at this, this is Aguero's opening argument. She doesn't see him clean his carpet. She sees him go in with a steam cleaner and come out with a steam cleaner. So he's planting the seed of this carpet cleaner. That's not actually what Alice Scott testified to. If you look at Alice Scott's testimony, the prosecutor, tell me what else you saw later in the day after the doctor's appointment. He had kind of a new little truck. I'd never seen this before over there, and I don't remember remembering that I saw it, and he was taking a carpet cleaner out of it, and he took it in the house, and he had the door open, and he was cleaning the carpet. So now, Alice Scott, who's the whole seed of this case, she's the one witness that's putting Leo coming out with something heavy, and the next morning she claims she sees this carpet cleaner, which would be perfect. It could possibly explain why no blood was in the trailer. But then on cross, Jack Edmond, the Colonel Sanders guy, starts questioning her. Now, when law enforcement questioned you on the 28th of February of 1987, and on every other occasion that they questioned you, until sometime recently, you never mentioned one word about a cleaner and Leo cleaning the carpet, did you? Yes, sir, I did. They might not have it down, but yes, sir, I did. When is the first time you told them about the cleaning of the trailer, ma'am? If I recall correctly, it was in John Aguero's office. It was when? It was in John Aguero's office. And when was that, ma'am? Sir, I don't remember the date. Do you recall whether that was in 87 or 88? I don't remember. I think it was in 1988. Like I said, I'm not good on dates. Alice Scott not being good on dates is a very important part of this entire case, because she would admit on the stand when she saw Leo carrying out something heavy, she wasn't quite sure of the date. And it turns out her own sister-in-law totally contradicted her and said, it was a week or two before Michelle went missing, because we had a conversation about it. We talked about it, but it was well before Michelle went missing. So now she's saying she doesn't quite remember, but it was in John Aguero's office. Well, Detective Weeks, who's with the Polk County Sheriff's Office, he's the one that's been investigating this case, and he's questioned Alice Scott several times, right after the murder, along the way. She never mentions anything to police about this carpet cleaner. And you can see, this is his report from that meeting in John Aguero's office. And once again, she says nothing to police about that. So somehow, John Aguero has learned about this cleaner, but it is not in the presence of any police. And so that's why there's no reports, no investigations. Nobody's going up to Leo Schofield and saying, hey, one of the witnesses saw you with a carpet cleaner. Where is it? We want to examine that for blood. Where's the carpet cleaner? There's not a single mention of it. And you can see Detective Weeks in his testimony. This is where, he says under oath that he does not recall her ever telling me about a carpet cleaner. And she didn't tell you anything about that, did she? I don't recall that, no. And his reports are very thorough. I've looked at them numerous times, and he really covers everything. That seems like a hard thing for him to miss. And then we get to John Aguero's closing. And he says, the police had been to the scene. The police got information that the carpet had been cleaned, and so they obtained a search warrant. So in his closing argument, he's tying this whole story up about why there's no blood in the trailer. It's because Leo cleaned the carpet and got rid of the evidence. And he's saying here that police had that information, and that's what got them the search warrant. This is the search warrant and the statement of probable cause. There's not one single mention of that carpet cleaner. And it's because Alice Scott never told anyone about that carpet cleaner until she got into John Aguero's office by herself with no recording, nothing, because Detective Weeks wasn't even there to witness this. And this is something John Aguero has done not only throughout this case, but in a lot of the cases that we looked at. These miraculous moments seem to happen when John Aguero gets together with the important witnesses in this case. And it's always outside the earshot of police or any tape recordings. Police spent about 4 or 5 hours in the trailer after the murder, the place where Michelle was supposed to be stabbed 26 times. And this is the only stain that they find and take back to the lab to analyze. This is a dirty old carpet. Leo had a couple puppies that were constantly, peeing and pooping on the carpet. Roommates were coming and going. It was an old carpet. There were lots of stains. They finally centered on this stain. It's the only swatch, about 4 inches by 4 inches, that they took back to the FDLE and examined for blood. And they could not say that this was blood. They said it could be possible blood, but it could be vodka, could be rust, could be any number of anything, any possible. But if you look at this, the reason I put that transcript there is because throughout the trial and throughout the questioning of the lab witnesses, he keeps trying to sort of conflate these early tests, the luminol testing, for possible blood. And he keeps saying that the carpet was positive for blood. Finally, the judge has to admonish him, and he says, but the results, in effect, do not show blood. I'm asking you to rephrase. I understand. Phrase it that way. And he was trying to mislead the court and the jury by saying that there was positive signs of blood. But again, these were peremptory, these are, luminol tests that they say possible blood, take it back to the lab. Not one single speck of blood was found in that trailer. And that's why that carpet cleaner was so important. John Aguero had to make the carpet be cleaned in order to prove that that murder happened in the trailer. And one of the things that was questioned that came up in the trial was he sort of insinuated, well, that when they did this testing, they can also test if it was freshly cleaned. There'd be a detergent in the solutions. They could test for that. Every single witness in there said that carpet did not look freshly cleaned. It was still dirty. And so our thinking along the way in this investigation was that the police and the crime scene technicians knew what their own eyes were telling them, that Michelle was not killed in that trailer. There simply wasn't time. And believe it or not, there were many witnesses that went into that trailer before Leo was alleged to have been vacuuming, including a police officer who came for a missing persons report. He did not observe anything suspicious in that house. So this is the one stain, came back negative. And you can see this pattern of John Aguero trying to mislead the jury. And it's something of a characteristic of he's done. John Aguero's office. If you listen to the podcast, you know that when Jeremy Scott is finally questioned about why his fingerprints were found in Michelle's Mazda, it's outside the presence of any witnesses. There's no tape recording. He just brings Jeremy Scott into that office and gets the story that he needs to do, that Jeremy Scott was just a car stereo thief. He's not a murderer. And that was how John Aguero often operated. This all kind of caught up to John Aguero a few years after this. He actually got arrested for alcohol-fueled domestic violence. And one of the things that was showing up when we look back at a lot of his cases, you can see one of his cases was a death penalty case that he got through, got a conviction, got a death penalty, and later on the Florida Supreme Court reversed it. And he lost that conviction. And it was the same kind of things you could see. Appellate court rebukes, pokes rabid prosecutors. What was the fundamental error? he was misleading the judge and the jury in trial. And he does it constantly throughout the Leo Schofield case. And it's one of the most disturbing things because after the trial ends, it becomes, a post-conviction case. And you start looking at the appellee briefs, the state's briefs, and they go back to saying that blood was found in the trailer. And they go back to restating all the things that were not true and putting them back into the briefs to just make it impossible to get any kind of post-conviction relief. So I won't go into the trial too much, but Leo Schofield was convicted. He was not sentenced to death. He was sentenced to life in prison.